Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Unleashed with Carrie. Today, I have my friend Kris Levy. He is a tactical leader with 10 years of military officer leadership experience. Kris helps leaders and entrepreneurs crush goals through discipline and focus in his community, the Win Club. While not serving the country or helping clients, Kris enjoys traveling, learning about wine, and staying fit. And if you want to know how to get stuff done, Kris is definitely the guy to ask because he is just on top of everything all the time. It's really inspiring. All right. So, Kris, what's the Win Club?
So the Win Club, or short for What's Important Now, it's just a community I started online this year. And really the goal of the community is to help people achieve their biggest goal for 2020. I think a lot of times when it comes to goals, people have these really big audacious goals and, they think about like, I'm going to get this done or that done this year. I'm going to achieve this goal in my business or in my personal life. Lots of times they relate to fitness, things like that. But I think a lot of times we get all these different. There's nothing wrong with having multiple goals, but if you're saying that this one goal is your number one, your biggest goal, the trick is staying focused on that one goal and not letting other goals get in the way of getting or achieving that goal. And so, the Win Club really helps people focus on building adaptability, because I think that's the most important thing. Because as we go throughout the day, you have to be able to adapt to the current situation and not just do well in the situation, whether it's an interview or you're taking a test or you're doing something for your job or even the gym. Like it's not just about doing well in that situation. It's about how am I adapting, like what am I doing in this current situation to getting my goal, which is the results I want. And so that's why I created the Win Club.
Yeah, I know that's something I've been struggling with lately. I now have found myself with more time, not found myself, I created more time for myself in my business. And I got more time and I was like, oh, now I can do this and I can do this and I can do that. I'm like, no, I have to keep my actions aligned with the goal, which right now is the launch of a program. And I found myself just like spiraling out of control with all these other things that I could do with my newly created time when I'm like, no, I need to be doing the essential tasks. When people come to you and work with you in your group or privately, do you find that they have lots of goals and you have to get them to find that one important goal, or are they already focusing on the one?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I think a lot of times the challenge is, people have these big hairy goals that they want to achieve, and they have some other commitments already in place in their lives that they're struggling to balance. And so the question is how do I maintain what I'm already been doing for the past several years, like having a career and then starting something on the side? How do I maintain what I've been doing and maintain the same level of performance so my day-to-day doesn't drop, but like add this new thing into the mix that I'm trying to get done? And so kind of help people sort through that and, kind of help them figure out places that they can kind of cut down on some of their requirements and some of the pressure that they're already putting on themselves subconsciously. Because a lot of times, we just have these notions of ourselves that aren't necessarily true. And so they sap a lot of your bandwidth. And so if we can free up some of that bandwidth, we can redirect it into places that are more effective and are going to get you the results or the goal you want.
What do you find are some of those common stories that we believe or tell ourselves that aren't really true? Do you see the same ones popping up over and over again?
Um, that's a really interesting question. I think like, so don't get me wrong, like there's definitely, these stories that we tell ourselves that I can't do something, I can't do this. And, as they say, the truth is always somewhere in between. I think that's very true. And when it comes to like, trying to think of the word, mental stories or, things that are holding us back mentally. And so, I don't think it's necessarily like this negative thinking that we always are slipping into. I don't think that's it. I think it's how are we thinking about the right things at the right times during the day, and that's kind of goes back to this. What's important now is I'm doing something, but is this going to really get me the results I want? And I'm thinking about something. Is this really going to give me the results I want? Because, our thoughts become our actions. And so, how do we continually, ruthlessly almost, cut or refine our bandwidth to keep us focused on the things that are going to get us success? And I think people need to not necessarily look at things as positive or negative, and more so as kind of like building blocks. Like, I'm doing this one thing, it's going to get me to this level, or give me this result, or give me this condition that's going to enable this further action. It's kind of like playing chess. I need to get me and put me in a position to this strategic end state I'm looking for later on down the road.
Yeah, I think the point you bring up, like when you first started talking here about the fact that it's not necessarily the negative beliefs or the negative thoughts, even though you said later maybe we don't even call them that, but that are holding us back. Those are the things that are really easy to identify. But it's more like, I think, some of the subtleties of just things we believe that may or may not be true, or things we're thinking right now that may or may not be true, that are holding us back. And those become harder to identify, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, it's I think generally, if you're thinking about something a lot and it's holding you back, it means it's something that's keeping you from taking action. So just go and take the action, and then that will eliminate that thinking pattern from your train of thought. So if there's like, if you think like, I'm going to do this, people are going to think this about me, then go do it, and then see what people think about you. Assess. So that's one strategy of just getting that thinking pattern, or that mindset block out of your path.
Yeah, someone the other day told me, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so good. So how did you get here to creating this club and helping people focus on the most important things, and aligning their actions with that? Like, what did that story look like?
So I mean, I've got a pretty typical, I guess, for me, upbringing and education experience. Did middle school, high school, went to college, and then started my career. And then I guess a few years back, I realized like I wasn't getting everything I wanted out of my career and out of my life, more so. And so I decided like, okay, well, I need to start like learning about not just myself and the world I live in, but like, how do I view the world? Like, what's my perspective on the world, and what's my perspective on certain issues and certain things in my life. And so I started this like, self-development journey by, reading books, listening to podcasts, talking to people. And I just kind of came to this realization that, while I have my career and I love my career, it's not everything of who I am and what I want to stand for. And so I realized I need to add something to my life to get more out of it. And that's kind of what brought me to starting the Win Club, which was just, one story, and it's the current story, or one thing of what I'm doing right now. And there's been plenty of other things that, as they say, entrepreneurs try 5 or 6 times before they get a successful win, are able to like achieve success. But it's this idea of constantly looking for opportunities and asking myself, what am I doing that's outside of the normal bounds I've been normally doing for the past 5 years of my career, that can add that additional level of gratification or satisfaction that I can't get from everything else that's already in my life.
How important is it that that thing, whatever it is, be it a business or otherwise, is outside the normal bounds?
Necessarily that important. It was important to me just because I was in this homogenous environment, and I felt like my creativity was strained. And so I needed a place to kind of express myself creatively. Great education there at work. But yeah, I don't think it's necessary. It needs to be outside the bounds, but you do have to ask yourself, is like, what's important to you, and what is and why is that thing important to you? And then a lot of times opportunities, they don't come in normal places, or they come in places where they are outside the bounds. And so you're constantly balancing that idea of what's important to you versus like what's the market saying, and what's the audience saying, and what is important to other people. And so those are two forces that are always going to be kind of fighting each other no matter what you do.
Yeah. So this got me thinking about kind of the difference between happiness and fulfillment. You were saying you weren't feeling so fulfilled. I can't remember the term you used in your career, and like it didn't you weren't standing for exactly who you wanted to be. I think sometimes we live in this state of chasing happy, where we think that happiness is an end goal, and when we find it, it stays that way. But what I hear you saying is something so different, and I think that's important to point out, is that it feeling fulfilled or feeling like you're, living your purpose or whatever buzzword you want to use there is so different than like just chasing happy and being happy all the time. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, and it wasn't that I wasn't being fulfilled in my career. It wasn't enough for me. I was just missing something else. And so um that's what made push me down this road, down this path I'm on right now. And I think happiness is, I'd kind of push it back to you. I'd argue a little bit, it is something that you're chasing, but not in the sense that it's something that you can achieve. It's a process. Happiness is a process that you're continually going through, and you're continually asking yourself, do the things I have in my life, the people I have in my life right now, are they making me happy, or are they making me not happy? And so it's happiness, I think, is achieved by going through that process of asking yourselves, what are the things and people in my life that are contributing to that? And you're constantly going a closer state than others because they're conscientiously asking themselves these questions. And that's why certain people don't get to it, but or at least they feel like they don't get to it. But yeah, I think happiness is more of a process, and it's not necessarily a state that you can just magically achieve by saying, oh, today I'm going to be happy. That's not always the case, because you might have all the things and all the people, or you might not have all the things and people, and some days you're going to be happy and some days you're not. So it's asking yourself, what am I doing today to get to a better place?
Yeah, yeah, I like that. So I think sometimes we hear people talking about happiness as like the achievable thing, but you're talking about it from the process that you have to go through to feel the way you want to feel and do the things you want to do. And
Right.
then it's also okay, like sometimes you're going to feel like crap, and that's okay, and you can make a choice about that.
Yeah, yeah. And to be clear, like, I think the happiness comes from the process. It's from doing the process of evaluating your own happiness and figuring out the things to cut out and the things to add into it to get you to, as close as you can get to your ideal life and, your way of life.
So if you don't work on the process, you're saying then a person's probably not going to identify as happy. Am I reading that correctly?
I No, not necessarily. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that have achieved that some sort of happiness that necessarily haven't gone through this process we talked about. But I think they're not mutually exclusive. I think there's people out there that aren't happy and they don't know why, and they need a process to go through to find the happiness that they're looking for.
I got it. Okay, I'm following. Um so because I often interview folks who had unusual school experiences, I'm curious about yours. What was school like for you?
I mean, school is pretty typical. I went to a somewhat competitive high school, large graduating class, like 1,000 plus people, and I did average or above that, maybe slightly above average. I don't know. Got into college, got my degree, had a scholarship that paid for all of my college. So I mean, I think education has its place. Like, I think it's important, because it, if anything else, it's a framework. And if you release people into the world that have never dealt with a framework before, then that can result in some problems. And this really gets back to this whole idea of adaptability and what's important now. Your more successful people are able to take frameworks and apply them to multiple situations, and to use the right framework at the right time in the right situation. And so the thing about education is it's only one framework. And if you don't if you don't cultivate that ability to assess whether the framework's effective or not, then that's going to limit your ability to, to garner success or whatever it is you're looking for.
That's really similar to how I speak with my families about school. I call it more of a process. It's not about whether you got the A in chemistry or English. It's, did you have the process that you can use and apply either in another class or in life and generalize to, a different place outside of school to help
Yeah.
you be successful in whatever endeavor it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, what, how do you see education as a framework?
Um, the whole I see it as kind of like on the macro scale. It's the framework of, having each year, being that grade, and then going to a 4-year college system, and then potentially getting your master's. Like, this is a very defined track. While there's, you can kind of pick and choose like how you go through choosing different classes and picking your major in college, and then, deciding what you're going to write for your thesis for your master's. At the end of the day, it's still a fairly widely agreed upon framework that is used by however many percentage of the institutions of education in the United States. And so, I think it goes back to, assessing, or one, understanding how a framework works. That's, hey, I go through these grades, I go through these years of schooling, and the end result is I get this degree, which, hopefully translates into a job, which translates into income down the line. And understanding like that's just one framework, and there's other frameworks out there. But if you can learn how to pick apart frameworks and, understand how frameworks work, I think that's going to be way more successful than necessarily learning any one particular framework, whether it's through formal education or not.
And is that kind of part of what's included in your club and services, that adaptability piece?
Yeah, and I probably haven't come out and explicitly said that in my group, and maybe it's something I can talk about in some of my content. But yeah, I think that is what the essence of what we're trying to get to is, understanding, one, if I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to get this goal. What's the framework I'm using to get to that goal? Because you can't just go out and try to get this goal by not having some sort of system or process to get there. Just the same as if you're working out in the gym, if you're trying to get certain results, if you're trying to bench X amount of pounds, 250 pounds or 300 pounds, whatever it is, in a certain amount of time, you're following a framework. That framework is a workout plan, and the closer you stick to that workout plan, I'll take that back, the more you assess your results as you progress through that framework and continually refine how you're fitting that framework to the results you're getting, the higher your probability of getting the success you're trying to get.
Yeah, you have to try something and then evaluate it. Is
Yes.
this working? Isn't it? If it's not, what can I do differently?
Yeah, so there's a book out there. It's I can't remember the name of the book, but it's by Neustadt and May. They're two strategic thinkers, and they do teach a lot of strategy courses in the Harvard School for Governance and Diplomacy. And they think about time as a stream. And if you think about how, like, where you want to be, like, this is the result I want, you got to look back at, the past, which is like other frameworks and other ways people have viewed the world, and figure out how can you apply some of those lessons and predict what the future is going to get. And then within that, you can develop your own framework to figure out, all right, this is the goal I want. So this is what the past has told me, either my experience or the experience of others. And that's going to allow me to either take and adapt it to my current situation.
So I know you work with adults, but how could teens take these ideas and use them to move forward, especially if they're feeling like that education framework isn't working for them? Now, I'm not saying, they need to go leave it and find another. I know you said there were other ones out there, but how can they use these ideas to take their next step, whatever that is?
Yeah, I think it's I think that the key is really start asking the questions and going through self-development. And that doesn't have to be books. It doesn't have to be podcasts. But I will say it definitely should include talking to people and talking to the widest array of people that you could possibly imagine. Because that's going to give you such a unique and wide swath of perspectives that will continually help you refine how you think about yourself and how you think about the world. And so if you can start talking to these people and asking them the questions about, what is that you're trying to find, or what is you're looking for, you'll start to notice like trends and patterns, either about the things that interest you or about the things that people say. And so when you start to overlay those things, like, hey, these are the things I'm like slowly gravitating towards, and then here's some of the patterns I've noticed that other people have told me from their experience or from their studies that have popped up. Once those things start to intersect, that's going to be where you start to find the sweet spot, and you're going to realize you're on the right path and you're headed towards in a direction. And that's the time when you can sit back and say, okay, what's the framework I'm going to choose to go with, whether it's getting a bachelor's degree and master's, or going to getting a trade, going to work in a company, or maybe starting creating your own framework. But I think that's the key to figuring out where do you want to end up.
How do you even know where to start asking those questions? I love to ask this question to people because it's something I'm still trying to figure out myself. Like, what questions should I be asking? And I don't let that hold me up from asking the questions. I still ask them. But I feel like that can be a really intimidating process when you first get started. And you hear a lot, well, you want better answers, ask better questions, keep asking questions. But how do you get started with that? So you realize like, I'm not happy right now. I'm not getting what I want out of life right now. I need to do something. Like, what do you do next?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good and really deep question. So I think you always have to have a point of departure. You got to pick a starting point, and hopefully there's someone there initially who can help guide you and find that point of departure for you or with you, and either that's parents or grandparents or a teacher or someone, even someone you just naturally gravitate towards. You're like, man, I like his or her message, whatever it is. But you definitely need to figure out, one, your starting point, and then two, kind of like those you got to put some sort of boundaries in place. You have to figure out what sort of framework are you looking for. Like, is this something that is going to either get me to figure out like the job I want? Is this going to help me figure out the college I want to go to? Is this process going to help me figure out how I'm going to add additional income to supplement my career? Whatever it is, you have to have that starting point and then those boundaries. Otherwise, when you can go talk to these people, if you don't have those boundaries, it's just gonna waste their time, because while you may be getting a lot out of them, it's not necessarily what you need. And so by having that point of departure and those bumper lanes, if you will, I think that's the way to go and start having these conversations with these people, saying, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. How did you do what you did to get to where you're at? And 9 times out of 10, people are more than happy to answer that question.
Yeah. I know, you and I both come from a world where we strive to always add value to other people as well. So while it's okay to ask for help, and we should ask for help, that's a whole nother thing. I think we don't ask for help often enough. But at the same time, like what can we do to help others in this process as well?
Yeah. And just to follow up to that last question one more time too, when you go and have conversations with people too, even if you don't know what to ask, just learning how to become a better listener and focusing on the other person and doing active listening, that does so much more. You're going to get so much more out of it if you talk 10% and they talk 90% than you would if you have all these laser precise questions that you're trying to ask, and you try to keep steering the conversation in a certain direction. Like, oh, what do you think about this company? Oh, what do you think about this school? Like, throw those questions to the side and let the person tell you their story. But yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I think listening is so difficult now. And I think we aren't sensitive enough to that sometimes. Like, we take it for granted that everybody's listening to everybody else, but really now we live in the world of distractions and we all have these narratives running in our own head. And just because you're hearing the word someone else says doesn't mean you're really like listening, thinking, evaluating, and responding. It's almost like a whole new skill I feel that needs to be taught now, because it's just not, it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. No, I agree, but I also think that people who are successful in whatever it is that they do these days, they're able to still listen and they're able to still prioritize. And I don't think that necessarily it's about listening. Like you can tell when somebody's listening when someone's not. But the question, you have to ask yourself is, what do I do with all this information? I think that's the biggest problem. Is we have way more information than we used to, and it's just exponential. It's an exponential curve. And so, as the world was developing, information just started to grow. People would send letters, then they would do cables, and then Morse code, and then all of a sudden, boom, computer age hits, and it's just exponential amount of information all the time. So the question, like, this is why having a framework is so important, because you don't have that filter to filter out all the irrelevant information, and you're once again focusing on the things that aren't going to get you to where you want to go. Then yeah, that is definitely a problem. That's definitely going to take away from your performance and take away from your possible success.
Yeah. It brings me around to the idea of when I prepare for these conversations, I talk to people who prepare hours. And while that may work for them, if I prepared hours for a conversation, and maybe this is my own flaw, but I would probably never listen to the person who was talking in front of me. I would just be thinking like,
Yeah.
how do I ask the next question to elicit the answer from you that I want to hear? And, I think it's important to know about who you are talking with, but I feel like sometimes if you know too much, it doesn't lead to authentic conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's more important about being adaptable and being able to focus solely on what you're doing right now and talking to that person than it is to prepare, excessively for that conversation, because you've got stuff going on before this conversation, and you would hope that you're going to put your full effort in whatever it is you're doing wherever you're at. So the trick is being able to apply as much effort and focus to the current task at hand, and then being able to switch rapidly to the next task, whether that's going from writing a paper and then switching over to an interview the next hour, whatever that transition looks like. But I think that's a key performance indicator of someone who's highly effective at what they do, is their ability to focus solely on what they're doing, to synthesize large amounts of information and filter out what's important, what's not, and then their ability to transition rapidly between tasks without getting stuck in them between. That's really the trick of it.
Yeah. Do you have any strategies for that?
Uh, Great question. Lots of theory and or non-empirical practice, but I would say one is having a calendar that helps, and having a planner, just knowing like what you have going on that day, having your morning routine, and maybe even an afternoon routine. Like for me, like the mornings, I have my mornings conquered. Like I have an awesome morning routine. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. My struggle right now is the afternoons, because that's when I lose focus and get tired, and all these different things. So one of the things I've been doing is like I'll move my workouts to the afternoon, or I'll try to find something that does not take a lot of focus or a lot of listening, or some of these things that require a lot of bandwidth, and try to do those during the times that I know I'm not at my best. And so I think that's a really important part, is just energy management, knowing what things to do at what times, and knowing what to say yes to and what to say no to.
Yeah. I know I, at one point, was shifting my workouts to the afternoon because um, I would wake up and I would be ready to work. So I would have a real short morning routine and then jump into my work before my kids were awake. And then that's when I would do my workout in the afternoon, and it would give me more energy.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's really important, that we don't necessarily, think we have to do everything in the morning or at a certain time of day. You do it when it works for you.
Yeah, and that just brings up another point I want to talk about. And two, it's understanding that doing certain things, and this kind of gets this back to this whole idea of having a career and having stuff you're doing on the side, like doing some of these other things, it gives you something else to focus on that breaks up the monotony of whatever it is that you do full time. And so your brain needs time to sort of absorb information, synthesize it, figure out how it feels about it, process. And by switching to something else that is either fun, exhibits a creative side, whatever it is that you're not like trying to solely focus on throughout the whole day, that I found is one, being able to boost your performance, I guess, for those times when you do need to, put your nose down and just grind. So I think, having those things, whether it's a hobby, a passion, art, whatever it is, like for me, it's wine. Like I love learn more about wine and just enjoying a good glass of wine at the night, and just, understanding the different intricacies and stories that goes into wine. And that gives my mind something to think about that's not work related.
How can you explain to others that your wine endeavor, or whatever we like to call it, is a creative venture? I think sometimes we think of creativity limited to like art or music or, dance, whatever it is. And I used to think for the longest time, I'm not creative. And then I had this major mindset shift and realized what I'm doing with my business, I am creating every day. Doesn't mean it's like cute. It's not that kind of creative, but I truly am creating. And I think, and my thoughts are that can often be tied to school, but that we have this kind of narrow-minded view of creativity, and we kind of lose it as we go on. But what are your thoughts on creativity?
Yeah, no, I agree. Also, I mean, creativity is not just, as people would think of like the arts and stuff like that, but it's also creative thinking. And creative thinking, I mean, that's not just like this idea of like being able to think outside the box, as people always like to say, but how good are you at picking up on patterns? How good are you at being able to evaluate information and understand what is it that someone's trying to say here, and how's your ability to communicate what you actually think about in your mind. All this like stems from creativity and your ability to put thoughts together. And I think the more you exercise it, the better you're going to get at it. And going back to that idea of having something else that's different from your work, doing creative things in other spaces adds to your ability to think creatively in different places like work or career or whatever it is, or school. And so the more diverse of these places that you're exercising your creative abilities, the more it's going to manifest itself in other places that you're going to be able to think creatively and critically about a subject or a topic, and come up with more and more precise information about what you think about the topic.
Yeah, I'm always telling my students that they need time to do things that they want to do.
Yeah.
Maybe they can't take on everything that they want to do, but they need time to do it, and they should not spend their whole life living and breathing and eating school. There's so much more out there to learn and do, and while your overall education is important, whatever way it looks, whether it's school or otherwise, you still need to do things that you love to do and have some choice in the matter.
Yeah, I think the idea is also, I think we had talked about this before, maybe on this call, but being intentional with your time instead of being essential. So someone who believes in essentialism would say, well, this is my number one goal, then I should only do things that support that goal. If my number one goal is to only bench press, then every day all I'm going to do is work out. All I'm going to do is do bench press. But everyone knows like that's counterintuitive. That's not how you get good at it. So I think that's why you need to be intentional with your time instead of essential with your time. And so acknowledging that, hey, this is what I'm doing right now, and for this next hour, for this next week, I'm focusing on this thing. And then I'm going to switch to something else that either contributes, that either builds on what I'm doing this week or contributes to my end goal in another.
So we're wrapping up here. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that you got into self-development. Who were some of your influencers, either people, podcasts, books?
Yeah, I think I always start with the Quintessential Tim Ferriss podcast. It's a great place to start, just to like start to unravel the world of self-development. But looking at like where I'm at now, I think some other the trickiest of like figure out what it is that you want to do or like where you're trying to get to, and then pick things within that industry or that market or that section that are relevant to what you're trying to do. But if you're looking for like, broader stuff to listen to then or to read, I definitely think that Tim Ferriss is a great place to start. And then also this book called Relentless by Tim S. Grover. So it's about the trainer for Michael Jordan and a couple other huge basketball trainers or basketball stars. It really talks about this idea of how do you become the best at what you do, and how do you maintain that drive. And so I think that's a really important aspect no matter what you do in the world.
Yeah, I think Tim Ferriss, among others, is a really great place to start, because if you don't know where you're going, because a lot of the teenagers don't, because they just don't have a global picture
Yeah.
yet at all, as much as we think they should, that Tim Ferriss talks about everything. Yeah, he's really into personal development, but the people he interviews, and they're just from all walks of life. The other one I really like is Joe Rogan, from a finding out what you're interested in point of view, because it's like, everything. You can find
Yeah.
out about anything and anybody, just because of the nature of the people these guys talk to.
Yeah, and you don't have to listen to every podcast or episode that these guys do. It's I personally am not a Joe Rogan fan, but I know a lot of people like him. But I mean, I'll start listening to a podcast and I'll be like, you know what, I'm not feeling this. Like this doesn't interest me, or it's not going to help me, and that's okay. It's going to help somebody else. But the trick is knowing that and acknowledging that as soon as possible, and then not wasting your time on it because it's not going to serve you, and then switching to something that is going to serve you, that is going to pique your interest, that is going to give you a skill that you think is going to be valuable.
Yeah. Keep looking until you find something that's your thing. Where can people get in touch with you, follow you, find you, all of those important things?
Yeah, no, the best place to have a conversation with me is on Instagram at the real Kris Levy, KrisLevy. I love just chatting with people and having conversations. So you can hit me up there. And then if you want to learn more about the Win Club, you can check it out on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/the Win Club.
And is that something that could serve teenagers, or is that just for the grown-ups of the group?
So probably have to cap it at not letting anyone under the age of 18 in the group. But sure. As soon as teenagers listen to this, or anyone else that is not of age, if they want to join the group once they hit that 18-year-old mark, then they'd be happy to have them.
All right, sounds awesome. Thank you. Thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it, and we'll have to catch up soon.
I hope I can't wait to hear all about this next couple months.
Yeah, thanks.